and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of the BigFooty Bombercast. I am your host, Bonster34, and I'm trying very hard to be still interested in the Essendon Football Club, but Grizz, after Friday night, I must admit, my interest has waned substantially. The last few minutes, they came back, they got within 10 points. Yes, you know, we kicked inaccurately and all that sort of stuff in the first quarter. But at the end of the day, the Eagles, whilst it was a better Eagles team than we've seen in previous weeks, they are still a very poor side at the moment, and we did not turn up at all. If you look at how they played against St Kilda then versus the Eagles, it's chalk and cheese.
Yeah, it's sort of back to normal programming for us this week, isn't it? We had a bit like after the Hawthorn win, we're all up and about, and then sort of just got squashed the week after. But yeah, I said after the game that I think I said it was one of the worst losses of the last couple of years. I'd probably change that now to probably one of the most infuriating losses of the last few years, just because, like you said, we kicked poorly in that first half where, you know, I think we were 7-11 at one point and the Eagles were 9-3. And most importantly, you know, we won sort of all the main stats. We won clearances, we won inside 50s, we won contested possession. You name a stat that normally indicates that you're going to win, we won it, but we didn't, because we kicked inaccurately the first half and we absolutely gimmied some goals to the West Coast with some horrendous turnovers in the second half. It was a performance which was infuriating, I think, because we did a lot right at points, but we were just so clumsy with the ball, and more importantly, the defensive transition was back to normal programming, which is really disappointing. We had an undersized defence, which was given no help by the pressure up the field.
Yeah, so the undersized defence worked the week before, and we sort of spoke about it last week, and I think you and I were in agreement that even though it did work, it's still absolutely moronic that they're going with such an undersized defence, and that was, you know, basically demonstrated on Friday night, because the Eagles didn't fall into the trap that the Saints did, which was, we'll just kick it long to a contest, have the ball hit the deck, and then our mosquito fleet would run it out. You know, they actually had a tall target in Josh Kennedy who clunked a few marks, kicked 5. Jack Darling kicked a couple. You know, that sort of strategy of a smaller backline probably works against the St Kilda, where they've got one target in Max King, but then you play against a multi-prong attack like the Eagles, and it makes you look silly.
Yeah, well, the Eagles had 18 marks inside 50, the average 8 for the season. So they've doubled their average marks inside 50 count. Part of that has to do with how the ball sort of being moved off their half-back line sort of without any resistance, which, like we said, was sort of back to normal programming for us, which is unfortunate. But you're right, they were honouring leads and they were honouring the free man inside 50. They weren't just sort of pumping it long, and I think Ridley picked up a shoulder knock early, which meant we didn't really have many options for Kennedy, and Ridley was at half rat power basically after that point. So dirty night for the defenders. I don't understand. Well, I understand the theory of, you know, playing small defence. If we pressure up the field, we'll be able to rebound it out faster. But we've shown 2 or 3 times this season that we're able to pressure teams at an elite level, which means we're just leaving our defence sort of, I suppose, isolated and undersized. I don't understand why, you know. I think I posted this on the board as well in a conversation with a couple of other posters that, you know, if Zerk Thatcher isn't playing now of all times with Stewart injured and an undersized defence, what's he doing on the list? Like, why would we drop Zach Reed? Why isn't Cody Brand play? Like, we have 5 key defenders playing in the VFL and we have none at AFL level. It just makes no sense. And if you play one of those key defenders, instead of Ridley playing on Kennedy, he plays on Waterman, and he can actually fold off. And so even if, you know, Zach Thatcher or Brand isn't as good a one-on-one defender as Ridley's able to peel off and help them and hopefully intercept and get us moving back the other way. Like, just structurally, we look so much better with Ridley on the third tall, but I don't understand why they refused to do it at this point. But it was crucified on the weekend, and this weekend it's Buddy and Logan McDonald, and McDonald's been in pretty good form. So I genuinely fear what we're going to do, what's going to happen if we play them. I want to touch on the goal kicking. We ended with 14-13 we fluffed a couple of really good chances in the first half. Peter Wright probably should have kicked 6-2 or 5-3 at least with some of the chances. Nick Martin missed a snap from 35 out directly in front with a minute and a half left, 20 seconds left. Caldwell Burns right running back to goal and misses as well. We left so many chances on the board in that first half. We really should have been 2 or 3 out.
Yeah, we should have been. I mean, Archie Perkins kicked 1-3, which wasn't great. Nick Martin, you mentioned 2-2, Peter Wright 4-4. Jakey Stringer kicked 3 straight, which was good to see. He's sort of back in a fair bit of form now, which is always nice. Caldwell and Hind also missed some shots that, on another day, who knows? Maybe they score them, but yeah, it was a tough old day. I think the other thing the Eagles did rather well for the game was they just defended better. We had we actually conceded four rush behind. So on our last line, I thought we were under pressure a bit more overall. But yeah, there was a period there where I think the Eagles kicked 6 or 7 straight, and at one stage it was like, are these pricks ever going to miss? And that sort of stuff plays into your mind as a player. But it's at the end of the day, it's no real excuse because as I said, the Eagles, they weren't the same team that we got in previous weeks, but they still, some of the blokes they brought back weren't at full strength. So, you do look at it and go, where have we been? What are we doing? I mean, Jamie Cripps has been pretty average this year and we let him kick 3-2. And I like Jamie Cripps as a player, but, he's been pretty average this year. So, and I think the other frustrating thing is, if you look at the stats for the Eagles and you go, well, Jack Redden had 22, Shuey had 21, Duggan had 20, Elliot Yeo had 20. They didn't have any huge possession winners. They just spread the ball nicely. And just for whatever reason, the boys just decided that I think they got ahead of themselves maybe. And just on the defender thing, you're right about Zerk Thatcher. I mean, again, dominated the VFL, had nine marks, 17 disposals, playing down back. I don't understand it. I mean, okay, you don't want to play. If you want to give Reed a break, you want to give him a rest, or he's injured or whatever, that's fine. But Zerk Thatcher's got to come in. It just doesn't make any sense. And the thing is, Reed actually did play in the VFL too. So
they said he picked up an injury, but if he was playing VFL, I don't know what injury he picked up. So at one point they were 10-3, or 10 goals 3, and we were like 7 goals 11. And it's just like, well, we've had 5 more scoring shots, and there's somehow 2.5 goals in front. It was just bonkers. Really, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so maybe a couple of positives because, it was only a 10-point game. It felt like it was way more, but it was only a 10-point game. Peter Wright, goal kicking aside, I think he's normally more accurate than that. But goal kicking aside, he was unstoppable, particularly in that first half. And I think in general, our forward line setup is far more effective now with him, Stringer and Jones up there. We talked about it briefly last week, but you could see, Jones and Stringer working off ball to help him out, Draper off ball helping him out. When we're able to isolate Wright 1v1 like we did in that first half, he looks $1 million. He looks probably our most dangerous forward out there when he's up and running, and his contested marking in that first half was excellent.
It was, and you're right. He did dominate, and we do look a lot better now that we've got Wright and Stringer. And dare I say it, Matt Golfy's finally managed to work out what a small forward looks like as well at the moment with his couple of goals in the last couple of weeks. So the forward line structure looks better. But yeah, Peter did miss probably 2 or 3 shots he should have got. He should have at least kicked 6 or 7, as you alluded to, which obviously gets us. Well, I mean, if he kicked 6, it was a draw. If he kicked 7, we win the game. Yeah, but I mean, I know it's a simplistic way of looking at it, but the reality is, at one stage there, it was 3. We were 29-8 up, so we were 21 points up. You come out. Of quarter time where we were 14 points up. Jamie Cripps kicks a goal very early, goes down to Peter Wright to answer back for us, and he misses, and back up the other end, bang a couple through, hit the front, and then they never really looked back. I mean, we did steal the lead back, briefly from another Peter Wright goal, but it really was just a disappointing performance if you look at it from that point. But you're right, we do have to look at the positives, and he was good. And another one that I thought was good, and is a player that I read our board earlier this week, Grizz, and people were going, "What's going on with this bloke?" And I'm not sure if you know who I'm going to mention here, but I don't understand why people are suddenly all of a sudden getting stuck into Zach Merritt, because I don't think he's been all that bad this year. I thought he's been perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It's just for some reason now all of a sudden people are looking at Zach Merritt going, "Oh, he's not the same player he was." But just let me run through some stats for you. So he's down on average by about 2 disposals from last year, which I'm not too stressed about because he had averaged 31 last year, 29 this year. So it is, not that bad. He doesn't hit the scoreboard that much, but again, didn't hit the scoreboard that much last year. His tackle numbers are down a little bit on last year, but he's still third for tackles this year, behind Caldwell and Shield. His clearances are still about the same. His inside 50s are about the same. His rebound 50s are still about the same. I mean, I look at this bloke and go, I don't see what the fuss is. I mean, am I missing something? Is Zach markedly down on form that sort of calls for the attention that he's sort of got this week?
No, so I think long answer no. I think there's visibly less damage with his disposals, but I think that's more emblematic of the team and the fact that we have struggled to move the ball so much this year. And so when the ball movement's stagnant and there's not a lot of options going forward, it's hard for you to utilize Zach's greatest skill, which is his decision-making and his kicking skills. And in terms of the raw numbers, no, he's perfectly fine. The tackles, he had 6 tackles this weekend, 7 last weekend, 4 the weekend before that, 7 against Port Adelaide. So he's cracking into the contest. Like, I think of all the problems Essendon has, Zach Merritt is well down the list. If he is even a problem, I still think he's been perfectly fine this year. I think he's still a Crichton chance at this point. He'll have to beat out Nick Martin, but that's a story for another day. I think his midfield running man, Dylan Shield, the Shield v Parrish rivalry continues. So Dylan Shield, just for reference, 9 clearances, 7 tackles, which, you can tell Shield's influence, but even slightly less disposals, only 26, so not a massive game, but he just provides so much drive to the midfield. I thought it was another strong game for him. That's 3 in a row. He's really starting to build into this back half of the year, I think.
The other players I want to ask you about, so obviously I dare say we'll see Phillips come back this week. On the weekend, I'm not sure if you saw in the VFL, but McBride played in the ruck. Baldwin had a bit of a run. Again, Baldwin in the ruck is ludicrous. Please stop doing that. Josh Hare had a run in the ruck. They even threw poor old Aaron Francis into the ruck. They've forgotten Aaron Francis into the ruck. I'm assuming that we're going to keep Draper and drop Nick Bryan. But again, I thought Draper was disappointing on Friday night. And I know my bias towards Nick Bryan shines through a little bit here, but again, Draper didn't lay any tackles, wasn't really that physical, didn't take any marks, didn't really get involved in the game. And so when you're up against someone like Jamison and Bailey and Williams, I just would have liked to have seen Draper take the game by the scruff of the neck. Well, Nick Bryan only had 1 more disposal than him, so he had the six kicks versus Sammy's 5 and the 2 handballs each, and he laid 3 tackles to Sammy's nil. And Sammy obviously had the 25 hitouts, but I still look at that and go, Nick Bryan is still relatively new to the game at AFL level. Sam Draper's had a bit more time, so a game like Friday night where there's no Nick Nat and Nui, I would have hoped that Sam Draper would have had a much larger impact than he did.
Yeah, Sammy was disappointing. So I'm you're sort of number 1 ticket holder of the Nick Bryan fan club. I'm the driver of the Sammy Draper train, and even I have to admit he was pretty disappointing. On Friday night, I thought he was comprehensively beaten by Williams around the ground. You look at the disposals and they're not that different, but I just thought Williams had far more presence around the ground. And I thought at the crucial moments, Bailey Williams sort of won a lot of the crucial hit-outs for clearances. And I don't know. I'm trying to figure out whether I would rather Draper dropped at this point, because I think we had the discussion a few weeks ago that I think going down the VFL and dominating the VFL, which I'm sure he would if he did that, might be better for Drapes at this point. But I think we've got to figure out the ruck. The VFL ruck thing, they rucked because McBride is generally the relief ruck, and he was the starting ruck this time. But I'm just looking at Sydney, and I reckon you could get away with playing one ruck this week. They have Tom Hickey, and that's really it. So they must have, sort of Sam Reid or someone else chipping in the ruck.
Sam Reid.
So I wonder if you could go Nick Bryan and Peter Wright, because I'm not entirely sure that Andrew Phillips needs to come directly in, and I'm not entirely sure, based off this week, that Draper deserves to be in the team over Bryan, although, Draper did have a pretty good fortnight before that. So, yeah, that would be an interesting one. I think the ultimate question needs to be asked about, do we fit Draper and Bryan in the same team long term? We've got to answer that question sort of soon-ish, I think, because Nick Bryan's out of contract at the end of the next year, and clubs will be after him. So we sort of got to figure out who we sort of want to sort of earmark as our ruck going forward, or whether we want to try play the 2 ruck system, which Richmond and Melbourne have used to great effect this season.
I suppose, since you've brought up Sydney, let's look to this week, because I don't know how much more we could talk about Friday night, because it was bloody disappointing. So I look at the VFL, Grizz, and think, if anyone's going to come in for us this week, apart from Darcy Parish, who you'd imagine will be straight back into the side if he's fit.
Yep.
It's mainly forward options. So, which is where I think your idea of playing one ruck, whether that be Bryan or Draper, is not a bad idea, because Kane Baldwin's actually been in pretty good form in the VFL. So, now he's actually got some touch there. Maybe you bring him up to have a crack at AFL level, because I
wouldn't.
Well,
sorry, you continue your point, then I'll counter.
But because the thing is, if you're dropping if you're only playing one ruck, you still need that relief when Wright goes into the ruck, and I don't think Bryan and or Draper, whoever it is, or Phillips, if they want to go full crazy, gives you that option. So I think if you're going to look at someone like, if you're going to drop at all, you probably bring in someone like a Kane Baldwin to have a crack again, because, as I said, I think he's found a bit of form. Jai Menzies, the other obvious one that has to come in. I think this week he's kicked 4 goals. Unfortunately, it probably means that my mate Tom Hurd is no longer the next cab off the rank in that small half forward pocket position, which I'm genuinely disappointed about, because I think he should have got a game at some point. And then you look down back, so you got to find a way to bring in one of our tall backs, and it's again a question of who you drop. And to be honest, I don't know who you drop outside of Dyson Heppel, and I know I've shot Bambi a little bit there, but
well, it depends on who you talk to in terms of shooting Bambi. Half the board would be happy with that suggestion. So my theory with Baldwin is he's kicking 2 or 3 games. He's getting pretty consistent. He hasn't torn a game apart. And my theory with Caden Baldwin is he missed 2.5 years of football development through under 16s and 18s through knee injuries. I would rather him play a solid amount of football as the number 1 guy in the VFL, just to get some reps, to use the basketball term. There was a basketballer, Clay Thompson, who did his Achilles and then did an ACL, or vice versa. And on his way back, he just said, look, I just got to get reps in. So he was doing the same drills over and over. He goes, I've missed that much basketball. I just need to get my reps in. And I feel like with Kane Baldwin, it's the same. He's missed so much football that getting the reps in as the number 1 guy at VFL level is probably going to be more valuable, than being the 4th guy, behind Wright, Jones, Stringer, at AFL level. If someone gets injured, bring him in. And, if the last few games of the season, you're going to bring him in, sort of just to reward him for his VFL form, that's fine. But I don't think, bringing him in as the 4th guy is better for his development at this point than just being the number 1 guy at VFL level and getting that confidence in his body. I think Menzies is a must. I would actually just drop a tall for Menzies. Whichever one of Bryan or Draper you're not picking, I would drop them and bring in Menzies, and then have Peter Wright as your relief ruck. And play Menzies forward. Because one of the main issues we had last week was no crumbing presence at all, and no pressure presence once the ball hit the ground. Menzies will help fix that a little bit. So I think he needs to come in. And then the ultimate question is, like you said, down in defence. I thought D'Ambrosio was pretty quiet. So you got to ask the question of, okay, he's had 2 games. Do you want to send him back down to VFL to keep developing, or do you think first performance was good enough to keep him in which case you're looking at structurally, do you drop Jake Kelly? But he's been probably one of our better 1v1 defenders this year. It's really out of him and Heppel, to be honest. Unless you're going to go full crazy and, I don't know, you want to drop someone else and move Heppel forward and shove a key. You're going to get really weird if you don't drop one of Heppel or Kelly if you want to fit in a key defender, which is probably what Truck's thinking. But we discussed earlier that we think it's a pretty flawed system. So plenty to think about ahead of Sydney.
Yeah, and just on D'Ambrosio, I still probably wouldn't drop him because, we've seen what he can do at VFL level. So I think I'm not too sure how much there's to be gained by playing him at VFL versus AFL level at the moment. But, if they drop him, I wouldn't be melting all over the place. I'd probably be okay with it. The other forward, of course, the other one that kicked a few goals on the weekend was Alec Waterman. So that'll be interesting to see if he can get his spot back. But I do suspect there is potential now that he may have done his dash for the time being, unless there is injuries. But Grizz, we will move on now to a topic that we haven't touched for a couple of weeks, and that is, of course, the best 22 in 22. And the last time we mentioned this, we actually locked in our full back line, and we asked for nominations for our half back line. And again, I think the message was fairly solid across the board. So, we got some nominations there of Adam McPhee on a half-back line, Michael Hurley at centre-half-back, and then, Michael Hibberd on the other half-back line. Some said Wellman, Hurley, Solomon. It's a tough one with the back line.
I think this might be our strongest line in terms of which, halfback flank is Dodora's favourite when you think about it. So I had 9 guys down as possibility. So we had Damien Hardwick, but he was named All-Australian in the back pocket. I don't think he made the back pocket because we picked Mark Johnson. So he's a possible selection at halfback. There's Adam McPhee, like we said, Dean Solomon, Michael Hurley, Sean Wellman, Dean Wallace, and a halfback in our premiership team in 2000. Although I don't think... Yeah, calm down, sheep. I don't think he beats out Hurley, though, so you can probably, take him off the list. Adam Ramanauskas, who I think was highly underrated pre the brain tumour, unfortunately. Adam Sard and Michael Hibberd. Let's lock in the lock-ins. So is Michael Hurley the centre-half back in our 22 and 22?
I don't know because I still think Sean Wellman should be.
Ooh, controversial. So all right, that's right. Make the argument for Sean Wellman.
Well, Sean Wellman did. I know that technically Dean Wallace lined up as the centre half back on paper in the 2000 grand final side, but I don't think you could argue that Sean Wellman didn't really play that role because I think Dean Wallace, bless his heart, was not the most skilled attacker or defender. So with ball in hand or one-on-one, if he wasn't the greatest player in the world. Fraser Brown can attest to that. But what Dean Wallace did do was he did put the fear of God into blokes. If they were standing there knowing he was coming from behind, that's what you'd look at. But so I think in the grand final side, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Wellman's actually in the back pocket, which is absurd because I don't think Wellman ever played back pocket in his life.
No.
So, yeah, I look at it and go that 2000, 2001, 2002, 3 and 4, Wellman was definitely our dominating centre half back, and he actually retired very early for a bloke of his quality. So he retired at the age of 30, and I remember at the time it was a bit of a surprise because we all thought he could go on a bit longer. But having said that, if we're going for the best 22 of 22, Hurley at centre half back he probably spent longer there, I guess, than Wellman did.
So it comes. I think it comes out. So they're both dual Australians. So Wellman has the premiership, which is obviously a plus. But one of Wellman's All Australians came in '98. So that's where I had Hurley as the tiebreaker. So we talk about sliding door a couple of times. For me, if Michael Hurley doesn't get suspended in 2016, I think he's a 3 or 4 time All-Australian centre halfback. He was dominant in 15 and 17 when he was named. I think last couple of years, he turned it into a bit of a possession hunter instead of a genuine 1v1 defender. But when he was at his best, Michael Hurley, he was outstanding as a centre half back. And I think he needs to be across the half back line somewhere, just because I think he's the only dual All Australian in the group of players I just mentioned.
Yeah, look, I tend to agree with you there. So, and because we obviously have Johnson, Fletcher, and then we have Hooker was the other one down back. You can't really play Hurley and Wellman as starting on the half back line. It's just a little bit too tall. So I would probably, I would go Michael. I think you're right in that Wellman's career probably just his dominance just spilled over into the wrong era. So we would probably look at Michael Hurley there in the centre half back spot.
So flankers, we've got Hardwick, McPhee, Solomon, Ramanaskas, Sard, and Hibberd. I'm going to do something really controversial and just rule Sard out. 3 years isn't enough.
No, it's not. That's not controversial. He didn't spend enough. As good as he was at Essendon, and he was a very good player, as much as some people don't want to hear that, he just didn't spend enough time. He didn't spend enough time at the club.
He was top 3 in our best and fairest all 3 years he was here. Like, he was an outstanding player.
He was a very bright star. He just burned too shortly.
Yeah. So it's really Hibberd, McPhee, Solomon, and Hardwick. I think Adam McPhee was outstanding in 2004. He played a lot of games for us, Adam McPhee, so snuck up on us. He changed his body shape a little bit, didn't he? So he was actually this sort of mercurially athletic, high-flying halfback flanker who had some good pace. And then as his career went on, he sort of beefed up. He sort of got too big and turned into a quasi-key position defender. But I think, 140 games, North Australian, best and fairest. He was, an outstanding halfback flanker for us. What are your recollections of Adam McPhee?
Yeah, so I remember Adam McPhee came across and played really well in his first couple of years, and then he obviously dropped down towards the end. So again, I don't know, did he play long enough at there? I'm not sure. And look, I'm going to do something even more controversial than what you did, and I'm going to say Damien Hardwick doesn't fit into the side simply because if we're talking best 22 in 22, he only played 2 years. Now, they might have been
a good point.
They might have been a very good 2 years, and he managed to win he won a flag, and it was an All-Australian in 2000, but I don't think his body of work in the last 22 years can count him into the side. I mean, to be honest, I would probably put, based on body of work, Sean Wellman in front of him. I mean, and that's the thing. If we're counting, Sean Wellman, the fact that one of his Australia, the fact that he only played 2004, and that's why we've gone Hurley, because he had a better body of work or a longer body of work. I think the same logic rules Damien Hardwick out.
That's probably a good point. So just for the record, 7 years at Essendon for Adam McPhee, 140 games. So he basically played 20 games a season for, 7 years. 140 games is not bad. And like I said, there was an All-Australian and a best and fairest in 2004 in there. So it's Ramanaskas, Hibberd, McPhee, Solomon.
So I'm going to put my heel in the ground and say that Dean Solomon should absolutely be in the side, because his work from 2000 to 2005. I mean, his last year with us wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. But his work from 2000 to 2005 and even up to 2006 as well, he was integral in that back line, and he made everybody stand taller. He does get remembered for his shot on Cameron Ling, which, despite the fact that people think that was part of his character, I think that was very much outside his character, because it was something that Dean Solomon, he did a lot of that sort of stuff for us without ever breaking the rules. So I just look at that and go that Dean Solomon has to be one of those halfback flankers.
Yeah, so he played 158 games for Essendon from 98 to 2006. 98 and 99, he played 26 of those 158. So basically 130 games. So roughly the same as Adam McPhee anyway. Michael Hibberd and Adam Ramanaskas, just quickly. Hibbo, much loved, left for Melbourne. For me, he fits into the Adam Sard camp of, 6 years, 84 games, probably just not enough. And he was All-Australian, but he was All-Australian at Melbourne, not at Essendon. And
he should have been All-Australian at Essendon, but that's different.
Yeah, that's a bit, we talk about sliding doors. Man, that him leaving, oh, gosh. And so really, I think we've got to pick two of Ramanaskas, who played 100. Just quickly on Ramanaskas, is his brain tumor, the first one. He got 2, I think. But that first brain tumor where sort of he was a rising star, second in the NAB Rising Star in 2000, our premiership year. Dashing halfback flanker, not like the rest of our defenders who are these dour, thuggish sort of guys. And I mean thuggish in the best way possible, by the way. He was this fleet of foot, silky smooth, rebounding defender. He played basically 100 games in his first 5 full seasons and then got the brain cancer, which effectively ended his career. He played a few games after that point. Just one of the big what-ifs in Essendon history, I think.
It was actually fibromatosis in his neck.
I thought it was a brain tumor.
So 2003, it was cancer in his neck.
Which
he recovered from and then came back 2004. 2005, he actually did his knee, which is why he didn't play 2005. 2006, you're right. He then had the cancer came back and he didn't play again. 2007, 2008, he managed to come back. But look,
it was a neck cancer to brain cancer. My apologies.
Yeah. So and look, so at the end of the day, my backline, because I think Adam Ramanauskas is one of the greatest what if stories of all time. The fact he came second to Paul Hasleby still rankles me, and I still remember Robert Wall saying, it's easier for Adam Ramanauskas to stand out in a good team than it is Paul Hasleby to stand out in a poor team, which makes absolute no sense because if you're in a good side, you're surrounded by stars, so it's very hard to stand out. So my half back line is Dean Solomon, Michael Hurley, and Adam Ramanauskas.
Ooh. Okay, so I had McPhee, Hurley, Solomon. So
the reason I picked Sol, as I said, I die on the hill with Solomon over anyone.
I love Dean Solomon. Don't get me wrong.
And the reason why I go Rammer over McPhee is I just think he adds that silkiness that McPhee doesn't have. I think McPhee and Solomon both have that brute force, built, can run, can bump, can do the tough stuff. But I think Rammer just gives you that silky left foot run that back line currently doesn't have. Because if you think about it, Fletcher, Hooker, and Johnson are also not the silkiest players in the world. So I think you need to be the silk down back, and I think Rammer gives us that. And Grizz, we have 2 minutes and 20, so make your case if you're going to argue.
Yeah, okay. So maybe take that timestamp out, Beery. But I don't know. I feel really conflicted because, like you said, I feel like if Rammer played 250 games, he could have been anything. But we're going off what happened. And McPhee did have no season Rammer had was better than McPhee's 2004. So, are we talking peak? Or are we talking about sort of balance of the team?
I'd argue his 2002 was better than Adam McPhee's, and I'd argue his 2000 was pretty bloody close too. But I think you're looking at balance of team. But anyway.
Yeah. Look, I'm not going to argue too much. I don't know. I'm really conflicted.
You got less than a minute.
So Australia hasn't had really I take that back. Essendon really haven't had that many All-Australians, and I feel like that should count for something somewhere along the line. If we're not picking Ramanauskas, if we're not picking McPhee in the 22 in the 18, he has to be in the 22 for mine. So can we make that concession?
Or we can debate the bench when we come to it.
Oh, don't do that to me. Yeah, all right, let's do it. So back flank as selected, just for the sake of time, we'll go back flank Ramanauskas, centre back Michael Hurley, other half back Dean Solomon. It's basically the 2000 premiership so far with Hurley and Hooker, but that's all right.
Righto, so that will do us for this evening, ladies and gentlemen. The next line, of course, is the centre line. So by all means, shoot us through your suggestions. Michael Long does not count because all his brilliant work was done prior to the 22 years. But thank you once again for joining me, Grizz. And I may not be here next week, but you will be with a special guest that we don't know who it is just yet.
No, we don't know just yet, but I look forward to talking to everyone next week.